Okay, we're going to get started here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Trixie Bennett. That's my English name. I'm the KIC Health Administrator, and I'm a longtime advocate for tribal health and for holding up our way of life here on Clinton. We're going to start out today with the land acknowledgement, and special thanks to Saxman community for always having us on your land and always welcoming the KIC tribe. Kayani Shawati Katiwata, Gate the Hotsity, Kachari Ayakat, Kichihit, Pachkana Ak, Taltan Dachkana Ayakat, Nanya Ayadi. I said I'm a Raven Frog from Wrangell. My clan is Kachari. My grandfather's people were Nanya A, and my father's people were Taltan. My mom was Minnie Larson. Her mom was Emma Shakes. The Kachari is the Raven line of the Shakes lineage over in Wrangell. But I've been here about 30 years with KIC, probably about 25 of those, maybe a little bit more since 1994. I worked with Search. So started as support services clerk and now the health administrator this past year. I have the honor to deliver the land acknowledgement, and that is to pay respect to the traditional people of this land, because it's their grandfather's names on the land. They are the Tontaquan and the Sandaquan people. They are the traditional people of the lands on and surrounding Ketchikan. The Tontaquan are the Ketchikan Sea Lion tribe. The clans are Godahuddy and Taquadi. The lands we stand on right now are up the Sandaquan. They are the Cakewalks tribe. The clans are Kikseti and Nehedi. I don't have it all memorized. Join us as we honor and acknowledge the ancestors past and present and future generations for the care they have taken in Ketchikan, so we may each live and thrive in this incredible place, this salmon rainforest that we call the Tongass. With that, I would like to acknowledge my Tlingit opposite, Naomi Micahson Coste. She's Wishkitar Tlingit and my friend, and she's been helping us put together this health fair. She's a leader in prevention, intervention, and healing for our people. She's helped my group put together this amazing agenda and the traditional healing side of the health fair today. So I'd like to welcome Coste and let her say a few words and introduce our clan leaders, our precious elders.
Dawda Yuhat Duazan, Wishkitan Nahatsati, Tus Hit Ayahat, Daktain Tan Yadi Ayahat, Akwan Away Yuhan. My Tlingit name is Kase after my grandmother, and Dawda great after my great grandmother. And Wishkitan, and my family comes from the Berners Bay area. And that is just outside of Juneau. And like Trixie mentioned, just really honored to be here, to have raised my 5 children and 9 grandchildren here in the beautiful lands of the Tontaquan and Sandaquan people. And really happy that we have all of you here today, and we'll be doing a lot of fun things this afternoon and this morning. So, I would love to start by introducing Harvey Shields.
My Tlingit name is Kana. Maybe you know something. My English name is Harvey Shields. My father is from Sitka. Is all my aunts are from Sitka. My mother is from here. And as we always know, as we've done for years, to pass on down the songs and dances that was given us to take care of, to teach it to our younger generation. As we always, as all of us do. And it's always good to have you, welcome each and every one of you to the house fair. It's a great honor for all of us there to be here. And my uncle Joe Williams he's from Ringo. And so are all my aunts. Hang up. Technology. No, I got documents. No. I've been born and raised here. I just turned 75 last month. And it's always great to on everything that we do. And we still out helping the younger generation, help them get in the wood and all that. You know, I do everything I can to help out as my brother does. So we still tend to take care of our mothers as my parents have for a lot of years. It's just things that we've seen them do, and we're carrying on what was taught to us. And so there's so many things that to put in place there. It takes a while for it to take all day to do it. But I once again I thank all the vendors and the house for being out here in Sonia Pond. And we do everything we can to keep together, along with Richard Jackson and Willie. And as I always say, all my honor goes out to all the veterans as well. And honor and respect them dearly. Our honor goes to the ones who didn't make it back home. At the same time, I thank you, each and every one of you for being here. Not the ones that are out in the hallways and the lower gym floor. But Ms. Cheech, I appreciate the honors with you. Thank you.
Benatish Harvey. We love our Saxman neighbors. Good to come. Well, next clan leader is Richard Jackson, and ask him to stand. Just so fortunate that we have you both here today. Benatish.
Thank you for the opportunity to welcome everybody here. My name is Pusha Cock, Smart Uncle. My Uncle Bill's name, Bill Andrews. From Takeway D, Cops Head, the Brown Bear, man who married the Brown Bear House. My father was from Kakwan. It's called Guantan, and the name was Kaus Tick. He was son of Catherine Shopridge and the family up there. Today is a really good day to talk about your well-being and your health. They're both two things that are distinctly important. And your well-being is how you connect with your family and your community, and how the community cares for you. In our community, we have Jetscan Indian community. We take that very seriously. To care for our other elders and our youth, and those that are parents and are going to be parents, and those that are going to go to school, and those that are going to go to college, to care for themselves while they're growing up through what the parents do with what they learn from healthcare and also behavioral health care and family care, family unit. Because it's really important. Because when we get to this age, I'll be 76 next week. And I feel pretty good. Kind of worried my wife has a big stick she bought this morning. Yeah. I hate work. But I just enjoyed conversing with Susan and Jim LaBelle here. They're going to talk about the boarding schools. Every one of us here are products of the boarding school, one way or the other. We married somebody who was parents were in a boarding school, our grandparents were in it, and it did have its effect. And whether it was good or bad, sometimes people had good experience, but many times they didn't. So, but it did affect us. It affected the family unit because you were raised away from your family. Like my family had brothers and sisters that went to Skagway, to Catholic boarding school, and my mother and father went to Wrangell Institute. So we got raised without seeing some of my family. When they came home, it was like trying to learn about each other again. And sometimes they never stayed, and they went to other schools. We didn't see them for years. And in this area, we even talk about relocation, talking about our all-youth friends out in our tribe relocating to here. And we totally enjoy the company of our friends that lead our town too, and that includes the mayor of Ketchikan, Mr. Severson. And he's doing such a good job. But because we took care of each other, we remain healthy. And that's what this is about. And I thank Trixie and all the people that are here today, and I can't name them all, that are going to present the healthcare to you. And remember that you do what they tell you to do. Remember to eat well. And remember, above all, to enjoy yourself and laugh. Because that's really important. So thank you. We hope you have a good day today and continue your health throughout the year. And the chief.
So, let's see, there's a bouncy house downstairs, and the KIC staff has worked really hard to put together all sorts of really wonderful information for you today. And Merle is in the back there with Devil's Club, and you have the opportunity to make your own necklace and work with Merle there. And then on the other side of the table, every so often we'll be switching out different types of wild and traditional foods and teas, and some different medicines. And so come back and check on that in that area as well. Jim LaBelle was here in Ketchikan about a year ago. Is that in November? And he's here today with his wife, Susan. And I had the opportunity to work with him in Dillingham for a week. It was minus 50 below. And it was really wonderful how they started every morning from 8 to noon with just stories from the elders. And they were also really hard stories to hear about boarding schools and their experiences. So, and then part of the other afternoon was spent on healing, and people were doing beadwork, skin sewing, they were working with plants and eating traditional foods, and did this for a whole week, and it was really beautiful. And they brought in people from the recovery center, and I think a young man was one of the, he worked at the recovery center. He's from Ketchikan, he's Alyssa White's older brother. Somebody might know him, but he was working with the treatment center, and they brought in people from the community, and so they didn't really leave anybody out, so it was really wonderful. So I've had the opportunity to work with him there in Dillingham, and also heard him tell his story when he was here in Ketchikan the last time. And so it is very sensitive and hard to hear, but we have many of the KIC staff that you can talk with. And also, they want to leave some time afterwards if you want to speak with them alone. They're going to be here for the day, so you can talk with them if you have experiences or questions or just comments that you'd like to share with them. So I'm going to let Trixie go ahead and introduce them a little bit more.
Good morning. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that there are support staff available because there are some hard topics. And of course, your well-being is our priority, so we want you to take good care of yourself. So if at any time you feel like you need to leave the room, that's perfectly fine too. We're here to support you as well. Again, just want to welcome you to our health fair, and thank you for joining us today. We're honored to have Jim and Susan LaBelle here to discuss indigenizing health and a vital conversation around the impact of historical trauma, including boarding school experiences and its ongoing effects in our communities. They'll share their powerful story about their experiences as Indigenous children in boarding schools and how indigenizing health is a powerful catalyst for healing. Jim and Susan LaBelle are Indigenous Alaskans and boarding school survivors who have dedicated their lives to advocating for the healing of their communities, not just their communities, but communities across the country. Their personal journey through trauma has shaped their commitment to fostering understanding and resilience among Indigenous people. As leaders in the conversation around trauma-informed care, Jim and Susan emphasize the significance of reclaiming our history and the power of storytelling and healing. Today they will share their experiences and insights, guiding us towards a path of healing and cultural understanding. We want to extend a real heartfelt gratitude towards them for their bravery in sharing their experiences and for their commitment to healing communities, especially in the work around truth and reconciliation from the boarding school era. We will hear about how we can support the efforts for our people as the traumatic effects of Indian boarding schools are still felt today, not only by survivors, but also their children and our communities. Their journey resonates deeply with many other survivors who have found the strength to share their stories, offering those paths to healing and understanding. So please join me in welcoming our friends Jim and Susan LaBelle. Try that microphone.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Got your ears on?
That's as loud.
I think we can all agree that it's kind of a little scary to be up here and speaking for a lot of folks. In fact, I'm so nervous that I want to go downstairs to the bouncy house. My Inupiaq name is Akkoyuk. I was named after an uncle who had passed away before I was born, and it's customary in Inupiaq country to name someone after someone who had passed away in order to keep the memory of that person alive in our family. And Akkoyuk means fast runner. And of course I say, not anymore. My mom came from Kotzebue. My dad came from Wisconsin. He was French and Irish. He died when I was very young, so I never got to know him or his culture. And so I grew up identifying as a Native person. And it was very difficult for me to include my father in introductions because I didn't know really what to say, because I didn't know much about him. And so I found a way to do it. It's kind of different, you might agree when I say this. I would say my father was a white guy, but I never held it against him. That was my introduction to my father. When he died, of course, my younger brother and I became a witness to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who decided that my mother needed to make a decision back in the early 1950s. Put your 2 children up for adoption or send them to boarding school. And my mother made that painful decision to send my brother Kermit and I to Rhineville Institute in 1955. I was 8 years old and my brother was 6. One of the first memories I have of that journey was in Fairbanks when our mother took us to the airport and we were met by DIA officials. And the first thing they did was they tied us together with other children with ropes. I don't know if you can imagine being tied, if you're like 5 years old, 6, 7, 8 years old, and the first thing that happens to you in a strange place is to be tied with ropes to other strange children. And all of that did was to serve to heighten the trauma that we were all experiencing there. And aircraft transportation in the 50s was really pretty primitive. Some of you that are older will recognize that we did a lot of flying with PBYs and Widgeons down here in the southeast, which was pretty scary. But to give you an idea of traveling literally hundreds of miles away and further away from familiar surroundings and landing in a very strange place, where one of the first things they did was, after they took us to the boys' dorm in Randall, was to tell us to get totally naked. And we were, because my brother and I spoke English, we understood the commands. But many of our fellow students who only spoke the language did not understand commands, get undressed. And some of these children were slow to understand and slow to respond, and matrons would come down and they would rush over in anger and they would just literally rip that little boy's clothing off his body. Rip his shorts off, rips his shorts, his socks, his pants. Children that came from villages that they came wearing only their fur clothing, their mucklucks and their parkas and fur hats and coats. Their clothing was confiscated and it was all burned. And we were told to get in line, and we were still naked, to get a haircut. And many of us, we didn't understand, again, what was going on, but we complied and we followed, we got closer and closer to the barber, and the barber just shaved our heads off till we were all bald. And you can imagine hundreds of little children, little boys running around with bald heads. We were marched upstairs to the shower, and there were these strange spigots sticking out of the wall, and a lot of us didn't know what those things were. Today we know them commonly as showers, but back in the day it was pretty strange. And we were marched into that shower room and we were told to bathe ourselves. And we were given a lye soap and a washcloth. And many children never knew how to bathe themselves. Were standing there wondering what to do. And again, matrons would come in and just in anger, almost always with anger, and scrub a little kid, sometimes using floor brushes on the skin and lye soap until this little guy's skin was bleeding. That served as a reminder to us other children that we better bathe ourselves or face that same fate as that other child. After the shower, we were issued, this is where we were issued our numbers. Every child was issued a 2-digit number. I was at Wrangell for 6 years, so I have 6 different 2-digit numbers. And these were numbers that were marked on our clothing because when you did the laundry, all of the laundry got washed en masse, and so they had to separate them by the number. But matrons found it very convenient for them to only call us by our numbers. We no longer had Christian names, we no longer had given names, we no longer had our native names. We were just simply a number. A lot of children years later, when we were as old as we are now, sitting around the table and talking about our experiences at Wrangell, and a lot of the kids would say, you know, I grew up in Wrangell thinking maybe that was my name, my number was my name. That was how dehumanizing that experience was. Everything in Wrangell had a lot to do about being punished for speaking our language. Because I was bilingual, I easily shut down my Inupiaq side and spoke English. But so many of my contemporaries only spoke their own language, and almost all of them were punished for just talking in their own language and not understanding why they were being punished. Getting their mouth washed out with soap, being put in darkened rooms, using heavy belts used on us, cat of nine-tail paddles on us, running the gauntlet on us. In the classroom, we were put on high stools in front of the classroom, wearing a dunce cap for speaking our language. It was a shaming, it was like a shaming pole, if you will. Everything was done to reinforce that we were going to be punished for speaking our language. And I think all of us understand that language is our identity. And when we start losing our language, we start losing who we are as Inupiaq, as Trinidad, as Sukriya, as Dene. And it was a very effective tool at Wrangell. Every day for 9 months, sometimes 10 months that we were there, it was a continuous learning experience of English only, beginning with the little first graders who were learning their ABCs and their numbers by rote, all the way up to the 8th grade, where we learned everything about the world, except we did not know who we were as Native people. And I can still remember the first year in the spring of '56, going home. My younger brother, we had been gone by then 9 months, and my brother, who by then turned 7, said to me, and I still remember that as a kid. He said, "I wonder if Mama will remember us. I wonder if Mama will remember us." And what I mean by that is that when you multiply that separation by all those years that we were there, it further took us away from family. It further took us away from community. It broke down our identity. And by the time I left Mount Eskimo after 10 years of boarding school, I never went home. I didn't feel a sense of family. In fact, I had been so indoctrinated in Wrangell about my mother being an evil person because she spoke her language and she practiced her singing, dancing, and drumming that I was told she was a devil worshiper. At home, I would be okay with my mom at home, but I wouldn't want to be seen with her in public. So in Fairbanks, if I saw my mother walking down the street, I would go across the street so I would not be seen with her. That's how ashamed I became of my mother. And here I was fully brainwashed into thinking that my mother was an evil person and I shouldn't be seen with her in public. She died in 1974, and at a time when I was still kind of embracing my own problems of having been in Floresville all these years, and I never got around to apologizing to my mother for my behavior. But more importantly, I didn't know how to be a parent. When I met and married Susan and had children, I didn't know how to take care of a child. I had no father figure, and I had no parental figures. And so, thank goodness Susan was there to keep the kids in survival mode in spite of me. But I was really messed up. I don't know if you know, as guys, as men, we tend to hold things together, and we don't want to share a lot of our feelings and our thoughts about some of the early traumas that we may have experienced, not only at boarding school, but maybe even at home or in our community. And so we harbor a lot of these things that if we don't, I've learned that by not sharing our story and telling what happened, it makes us ill. It made me ill. I'm a type 2 diabetic today. I have a condition called FSGS, where my kidneys, or my body thinks my kidneys are alien life forms. I have half my thyroid taken out. I've had multiple pneumonias. I've had shingles. All of these illnesses, I believe, are manifestations of trauma that I experienced as a youngster. Not only that, I started drinking and carousing and running around and having 2 chips on my shoulder and just simply being angry all the time. Angry. Not understanding what was the source of my anger. When my wife said enough, I needed to go get help. And I embraced that because I didn't want to lose her and I didn't want to lose my family. And it was painful because I started having to reveal a lot of those early traumatic things that happened to me as a kid in Wrangell, and at home as well. And I discovered that through the course of that, I started getting a feeling of a whole weight of guilt and shame lifting off my shoulders. Because I was in a safe place. I was sharing my story with others, and they listened. And we listened to their stories. And by listening, just that total listening in and of itself is healing when you tell your story. And I just felt such a world of weight lifting off my shoulders. And I tried to find ways to, I looked at what can I do to help others the way I was helped with my own problems. And I started joining sobriety movements, I started joining wellness movements. I even got involved with a national group called the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition that we call NAPS. And we have been working since 2012 to get our country to acknowledge the role they played in trying to forcibly assimilate and acculturate Native people, not only in Alaska but across the country. And last week was the accumulation of a lot of that work, because Susan and I were in the audience when President Biden made his apology speech about the government's role in trying to forcibly assimilate and acculturate all of the boarding school survivors and their descendants. And we agreed that although the apology is important, it needs to be followed up with action. And in the meantime, we've been working with your local, well, she's local to you guys, but she's our Senator Lisa Murkowski, who submitted a bill called Senate Bill 1723. I hope you get a chance to read that bill. It's called the Truth and Healing Commission Bill. And in that bill, we are asking for land back. Many of you know that many of the boarding schools in Alaska were associated with missionary groups that were given lands to conduct that work. So in that bill, we are asking for those lands back. We want resources that the country could give back and to support language programs. Because as you know, one of the first things boarding schools did was try to erase our language. In that bill, we want the resources to be created so that we can relearn our languages and have the resources to do that. We want our artifacts back that the missionaries took or institutions took. We want to continue digitizing and archiving historical records by these different groups. And of course, we want the resources to continue our oral history project. And what I mean by that is that we're all given an opportunity to share stories about what our experiences were at boarding school. And it's just not for the survivors, but the descendants. And one of the biggest things we're hoping for is the creation of healing centers across America, where Native groups and organizations that can control that healing environment is going to be supported by the federal government, so that people that still are hurting from their experiences or their descendants can come to a place and heal from that. The reason that's so important is that the federal government has done this to us for 150 years. And it's going to take a while for us to reclaim ourselves back to become whole again. It's a process. And I just want to just thank you for your time and your listening. And like Richard and others, I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I didn't serve in Vietnam, but my younger brother Kermit did. He was killed in Vietnam. He had 41 days left. The ironic thing is that a friend of his was going to serve, was going to go on R&R, but he still was required to serve a 4-hour watch. And my brother said that he would stand in for his friend and serve that watch. And it was during that time that an incoming came in and killed him. So he died in the DMZ near Quang Tri Province for that time period. He was only 18 years old. The Marines offered an honor guard to escort him back to Fairbanks to be buried, have a military funeral in Fairbanks. But I convinced my company commander, I was in the Navy at the time, to cut me some orders so that I could become my brother's honor guard. So I flew down to Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay, and I brought my brother home. And that's the connection I think I have with a lot of folks down here in Southeast, because so many of my fellows did serve in Vietnam as well. And strange as it may sound, for all of the negative experiences I had in boarding school, I developed such good relationships with so many. I have long-lasting friendships. You can't get 10 years of living in Southeast out of your system. And I spent 10 years down here at Wrangell and down on Richmond. And then I worked an entire summer in Juneau, Douglas, after high school. That's what I meant about not going home again. I went to work in Douglas. And so I have this really strong connection to this place. I have a real strong connection to my fellow warriors. I know a lot of us are still hurting from our experiences, not only as in war, but also from our times in boarding school. And I'm hoping to be available to help you if I can, and in ways that I hope you keep track of those bills. And so we want that as part of our national legislation. Thank you.
Good morning. I first want to say thank you for inviting us. It's been a real honor to be here with you all and to be able to share a little bit about our experiences and our healing paths. Just to let you know who I am, I'm Susan LaBelle. I'm Supil, Dene, and Filipino from the village of Port Brand, which is a tiny village located on the tip of Kenai Peninsula. I am named after my grandmother who had passed away. I only had my grandfather in my village, and so I was very, very close to him. I really have enjoyed the time here. I really will treasure these moments. I feel like I've been at home because my village has mountains and the water and the rain, so it's all real familiar. Like Jim says, we have made hundreds of friendships and connections from all over. I feel like this is so much like home. I went to Wrangell and Monteshman. I went to Wrangell when I was much older. I was 15 by then, because I refused to go the first year. I didn't want to. I was afraid to go off by myself. At 14, I didn't know where I was being sent. But by 15, I didn't have a choice. Back in those days, we didn't have choices or options other than to be sent away to boarding school. Like Jim described, Wrangell is pretty much similar. So my experience is not any different from many hundreds of others, but there are some very disturbing stories we've heard throughout the country, not only here, but throughout the country. Wrangell was pretty shocking for me, an experience to leave the comfort of my village. I was born when the TB So I was pretty much raised by aunts and uncles and my grandpa next door to me. And to leave that small village of comfort of food and family was pretty difficult. To land in Rangoon, and things were pretty shocking. I had never seen or experienced before. As we got processed the way Jim described it, we had all our belongings and clothing taken away and issued government clothing to wear and given a number. So it was really strange not to have to be called by number. And the thing that I remember most about Rango was the food. It was so horrible. We were fed foods like powdered eggs, powdered milk, canned foods, canned meats, and then we were served on metal trays. And being, as a child in the village, I was like not a big eater, so I didn't always finish my food. But I remember this woman would always stand by me. Miss Krebs was her name. She'd hover over me, make sure I ate everything on my tray. And usually he describes what happens to you when you eat foods that you're not familiar with, yet your body is not used to. But we had to eat them, and it was not a good eating experience. Of course, we missed all the foods. I'm from a village where, much like here, we had all the seafoods and salmon, cockles, and clams and crab. But that no longer is in my village after the exiles. But back then, as a child, we had so many subsistence foods to live on, hunting and fishing. My father was a hunter and a fisherman, so I was raised next door by an aunt and uncle, and then until my father died when I was 11. Back to boarding school, it was great to meet others from throughout the state. Coming from the Supek village, and I spoke my Siksika language because that's the only way I could communicate with my grandfather and my aunties and uncles. But in school, we weren't allowed to do that. Even in the village school, we were punished with soap and whatever. So that was the strangest experience. Spending the year in Rango and then transferred to Mondelsburg, which was much more pleasant. However, the struggle I had was being away and separated from the comforts of home and village life and native foods. We were not ever allowed to go home and visit or spend holidays back home. We were to strictly stay at the institute, at the facility, and there were boundaries we couldn't. We couldn't pass any limits as to where we could play and go. The struggle I had was being separated, not being able to communicate with my family. We didn't have telephones in the village. Only mail and letter was the only way. And in my village, we got mail, we received mail only once a week. And then by the time the staff received it in Rango, they opened our letters, read them, and blackened out anything that they didn't approve of. So one of the shocking things things I discovered when I went home after Rango was to discover that my grandfather, my beloved grandfather, had passed away, and I didn't know about it. And then going on to Edgecombe, my aunt and uncle who raised me, who were flying to Southampton to have a home built so I wouldn't have to go to boarding school, died in a plane crash. So the loss and grief and separation were issues for me, and I still, to this day, struggle with that, and trying to heal from all that, from that loss and grief. And as a parent, it was one of the things that I discovered about myself as we were raising our 3 kids is that I was too protective. I tried, they wanted to go to boarding school, but I said, not at all, but we've tried to overcome these kinds of issues and try to develop healing and all the connections we've made. It's just been wonderful. And I have to share what I have done in my life is to work with families and children. And I've done family service work. And so I've gotten to know families and living and working in Anchorage, getting to know families from all over us and helping families try to stay together, remain together, and advocate and fight for them in court so they don't lose their children or help reunite them. So that's in my own professional life has been to work with children and to make sure children thrive and prevent any traumas so they can build healthy lives in their lives. I want to say thank you again. It's been a great, wonderful time here. I'm happy to meet some of you for the first time and make all kinds of connections already.
I told this little story to the staff the other day about Susan, and Papa and everything. She mentioned that she was born when her mother had active tuberculosis. So Susan was born a preemie. She was barely 3 pounds. And the midwives back in 1948 knew exactly what to do. They wrapped her up, and they put her in a bread pan, and they stuck her in the oven. And that was the incubator. A neighbor had a nickname for Susan all the years she was growing up, and one day she decided to ask her aunt and uncle, why does he always call me loaf of bread? But that just kind of illustrates some of the resilience and traditional knowledge that was used to keep us alive and thriving. And I'm hoping we don't lose that in this modern age. I hope we can remember those things and add to what we're doing today. One of the things I just want to ask a question to those in the audience. Raise your hand if you have children. And I think most of you know, you can probably remember your kids when they were 5 years old. Now imagine a stranger coming into your community and taking your child away, and you have no choice but to give them up. That's what happened back in the day. We had no power as Native people over our children when it came to going to boarding school. And we have 229 villages all across Alaska, and many people that worked in mission schools and BIA schools would go to these villages and just literally take children away. Some families chose a passive aggressive posture, and they wouldn't have anything to do with their children being that intermediary between them and the person taking the kid away. They just simply did nothing. So a lot of children thought they were kidnapped. I went to a lot of villages over the years, and almost to a community. When we talked about children being sent away to boarding school, I was in Malek one time, and the elders in the village said there was an eerie crying in the village. It was eerie because there was no sound of children. They were all gone to boarding school. I can still remember at Wrangell, we were all forced and punished if we showed any sign of emotions. And it was only until the lights went off in the boys' dorm that we could start relieving the stress of the day. And that came in the form of tears and crying for our mothers. And if you can imagine an entire boys' dorm, little boys' dorm, all crying together in unison for their mothers. It's completely dark in the barracks, in the dorm. Mama! No one came to us to hold us. No one came to tell us that we were loved. No one told us we were okay. And we cried ourselves to sleep. And we cried so hard that the next day our eyes were all crusted, shut. And then we did it again for weeks on end, until toward the middle of the school year, no child cried anymore. We became a little hard-hearted in that reality that crying was not going to bring our mothers to us. Crying will not bring our grandparents or uncle or auntie to tell us that we're okay. So we got kind of hard-hearted in our young way of life. And it comes out in strange ways when we got older. And for me, it came out in anger a lot. And drinking. And it took me a long time to understand that those were just simply things that I was suppressing all these years. And that I needed to talk about what my experiences were so I could be a better human. And I'm willing to share any comments or advice that you have or answer any questions you might have. Because there's still trauma today. There's a lot of it we inherited from our parents and grandparents. And we're still having to deal with that in our own lives. And then we have to think, are we giving it to our children? And is our grandchildren experiencing some things about ourselves that we don't really recognize that we've done that already? I'm starting to see behaviors in my grandchildren that shouldn't be there. And I'm starting to figure out it was because of me. So we need to figure out in a healing way, in a healthy way, how can we break this cycle of trauma? How can we break the silence and begin talking and sharing so that we can heal as not only ourselves but our families and our communities. Thank you.
We're going to open for questions, but from experience, I know a lot of people don't ask questions right away, but there's one there. But there's little notes on the table if you want to ask questions and give it to us, we could ask. And the little bells are here for the afternoon. So we just want to put that out there right now. Did you have a comment? Okay. All right. Cindy, do you want to come to the mic, or we can bring a mic?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. My name is Cindy Taylor. I'm born and raised in Ketchikan, and I wanted to discuss what you were just speaking about. My mom went to Wrangell Institute also. So the thing about that is she never talked about it. My grandmother and my mom never spoke our language. So the shoe thing. I was always told to never go past the Red Bridge. All of you guys know what the Red Bridge is, correct? I was never allowed to go to the Red Bridge because that's where the Native boys were. And I wasn't supposed to go to the Native boys. But unfortunately, here I am. So anyway, back to what you were talking about, because that's what they were told. I grew up in a white world. So I missed a lot of where my Aleut side came from. Nothing. So the assimilation that you had is a residual effect that is also part of my upbringing. So it didn't stop at the residential school. And so that's what I was saying, is that we were not allowed to speak it, we weren't allowed to talk about it, we weren't allowed to ask our heritage, nothing. But anyway, to make a long story short, Christy Moss, Ashley, and myself, and who's the other one? What? Oh yeah, Kitty Evans. We are starting a Aleut group here in Ketchikan. We're just now forming it. We're trying to get our articles of incorporation going. Pretty soon there'll be an ad in the paper to invite anybody that is Aleut or is raising Aleut children or has Aleut, whatever, will be allowed to join us, because we want to bring some of our own culture to Ketchikan. And that's what we're trying to foster. So another thing is, I was ecstatic about 5 months ago, I found out that somebody here in Ketchikan had the last cabin that was used at Ward Lake for the internment camp. I was told I could have that cabin. I had to leave on medical, and we discussed on Facebook what we were going to do. And some of the stuff that you guys go through was really sad, because people said it was too hard to talk about. It brought up bad memories and all this other stuff. So the person that had the cabin burned it before I could get that. So that piece of our heritage is gone. So I want everybody to remember that you can't erase it. You can't get rid of it. You can only learn from it. And the horrible things that happened at these institutions nationwide, not just here, nationwide. The children that had to go through the things they did, and you're still living it and everything else. The reason why we have our culture and everything is to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's what we have to remember. We don't ever want this to happen again. So, be aware that the Aleut, it's called Aleut Group on Facebook, and it'll be up and running pretty soon. But look for the ad in the paper, and we'll have a meeting time and everything for anybody that wants to join. And we can all get together and bring our culture to Ketchikan. Thank you.
To teach Any other questions? I guess this is the spot.
Ms. Cheesh. My Klingon name is Clay One. I think my dear brother. I'm Richard's older brother. Richard will be put in our chief on the 16th. I had the opportunity to meet Jim LaBelle in Wrangell when I was going through there from Cape. We were having a gathering of the elders at that time. And Wrangell, Linda Blankenship invited me there. And what I shared with Jim and them and what our mother Talpier had shared, and many of you probably had her as this school teacher, Esther Shea. My father, our father, Milton Jackson, went to boarding school there as well. And that's where he met her mother, Esther Shea, Esther Jackson, Esther Harris. I was telling the story when I met Jim. Dad was on the basketball team for Wrangell. He knew how to drive because he was at a cluck on, and his family had clicked the horses that couldn't go over that trail, gold trail. That's how old that is. When he went to Wrangell and met Esther, I think they were in their 10th year going together, or 10th year in school. Our father had bought some material for a suit. And we wanted to have a suit made so we could graduate with Esther. Dad told our mother, I want to go to this seamstress class and learn how to sew. And Esther's comment was, oh, you're just going in to see the girls, see the other girls. There's a happy side to boarding school. There's a loving side, and that's what I want to share. Because that's where I'm at in my life now. I had to go in many circles to find myself. The PTSD trauma centers I had to go through. Culture kept me alive. And I'm grateful for Richard and Norman and Betsy and my mom coming to see me when I was in a treatment center in Monroe, Washington, because of the fact of what took place. And going to Vietnam was not a nice trip for me, and get wounded there twice. I was angry. I was very angry. I can't afford to be angry anymore. It takes too much energy. It takes way too much energy. It takes all that happy time away from you. And when I heard Jim LaBelle say, I see my grandchild, I see that. I see that. I got an 18-year-old grandson, Sage. He just graduated this last year from Rebella High. Many of our kids go to Rebella High because they can't assimilate in the high school, and we wonder why. We wonder why. He graduated, and he went right to work. I raised him for 16 years. And you know, for the longest time, he'd get angry at me. That's where the shirt came from. It's that grumpy old bat. Today, his anger lasts less than a minute. He'll come up to me, he's 6'1", 6'2". He'll grab over the grandpa and say, I'm sorry, I love you. Yes, he can. Dad and Mom got married. Dad had that suit made when they graduated in their 12th year. He had it pressed in Wrangell, and he wore it at graduation when he walked with Esther in Wrangell. Mom seen him. I said, oh my goodness, no, you bought a suit for me. And our father's comment was, that suit was made. That same suit that our father wore when Howard Israel graduated in high school. Richard and I, all the boys, went with Dad to see Howard graduate. Dad had that zoot suit, and that's how old it was. He had it pressed. He looked nice. And they asked the parent to stand up. Dad stood up and looked around the audience at the parents. And the men were in their latest suits then. Richard remembers when Dad had 2 suits made in China. He had them made because Norman was the last one to graduate. Dad had one of those suits on when we went to watch Norman graduate. When they asked the parents to stand up, our father stood up, and he looked around the audience, and now the men were back wearing suits. Suits were back in. Those are the comments that leave me, that there's life. There's life, and we have to share it with our children in another way. I'm really grateful to hear my sister talk about her people. I got drafted as a Dutch Harbor when I was 19. I moved around a lot because I wanted to work so bad. My father didn't want me to go, but I went. Jim LaBelle, Sue, thank you for coming to Ketchikan. And I'll share it again every time I see him. I met him in jail, in prison. He worked the state prisons for the state of Alaska. I was working for KIC at the time in the jail to promote culture. I'm going to share this story with Richard because Richard's a big part of my life. When I sobered up, I was in Monroe, Washington Treatment Center. Right next to Monroe was the Monroe State Prison. That's where I should have been. I didn't go there. Richard, Mom, Betsy, and Norman were down for the Goodwill games at the University of Washington football stadium. And they were down with Arnold Schwarzenegger was leading that American Indian group in Washington State. And he couldn't control the native people of America in that University of Washington football stadium. So they asked if anybody had any military training. Richard raised his hand. You know who the first ones who march out on that field and dance? It was Tongass tribe. Tongass tribe. My mother came to see me on a Monday, visiting at Monroe Treatment Center on Sunday. And my brothers, my sister, and my mom had on the regalia with her gal or drum. And the director came, he was an ex-football player. And he says, you give me a good reason why you want to see your son, Esther, you go see him. This is what she said. I should have done this a long time ago. It was a healing process. They let us in. They let him in. The only other stipulation to that was it has to be witnessed. There were 70 of us co-ed in that treatment center. Also told my brothers, Norman and Richard, dress Willie up. I wore the old Kilowell tunic, which is probably 300 years old. Dress him up. If he doesn't dance, pick him up. That's what my mother said to my brothers. The moment my mother started singing and my 2 brothers started dancing, I've been dancing ever since. Culture's alive in Southeast Alaska and around the world. One of the greatest times I had was sundancing with the Centena in Calgary to find myself. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for Jim. I'm grateful for the health board that brought this in front of us. This is something we just need to look at from day to day. It's something we need to live with and share with one another as a tribe. We're one tribe. We're not multiple tribes. We're one tribe. We're one people. Thank you.
And she, Shirley, we also met in jail. And Ashish, thank you so much for having the strength to share your stories. My grandmother also went to the Rainbow Institute as well. And then the children were separated into the Pious Missions, Skagway area and also Rainbow. They were separated. So there are many, many stories I know that haven't been told, and it hasn't always been safe to tell our stories. And so it takes a lot of strength and your own healing to be able to have that, to be able to share your story like you do, Jim and Susan. And I can only imagine what it was like to be in Phoenix last week when the President of the United States apologized to Native people for the boarding school errors. So, we're going to transition and take a little bit of a break, but before that, if there were questions that you didn't get answered that you wrote down, you can give them to Trixie or I, we can give them to Jim and Susan. And Jim and Susan will also be here the rest of the afternoon, and they're gonna probably go to the bouncy house. But they'll be coming back here into this room, and please introduce yourselves, and if you have you want to share something with them, that's why they're here today. Thank you for coming to visit us here in Saxton, Ketchikan, and thank you again to Harvey and Richard for being with us today. I would also just like to say we're going to come back at 1 o'clock, and we also have a very special guest with us, Vivian Mork. Yay! She is ducting on my father's people. So we're really happy. She's going to be talking about traditional healing and plant medicines. And she's an expert and has a lot of information to share, and we're really happy that she's here with us as well. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. There's more things around. If you haven't been able to look around, but please come back at 1 o'clock to listen to Vivian. And thanks again to Jim and Susan. It's been a treat.